We're honored to have journalist, activist, author, Harvey Wasserman. Harvey, how are you doing today?
Hey, Egberto, whenever I'm with you, I'm always great. It's great to be on your show.
Hey, brother, I've been trying to get to you for the last few weeks to talk about the Supreme Court. What do we do? I mean, Roe versus Wade is just the start, because when they're coming in the next session, we're going to be going back to discuss some interesting things about states' rights. But let's talk about abortion first. What's going on? What do we do?
Well, these guys, you got to remember, we're on the brink now of having a dictatorship of the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court believes it has a divine right to rule the United States of America, just like all those kings did, back in medieval Europe.
Mm-hmm.
And these people, people talk about bringing America back to the 1800s. These people, these Supreme Court, I won't call them justices, whatever they are, judges. They come straight from the 1630s in Boston, when Boston was run by the Puritans. These people who walked around in black robes. They burned you at the stake if you were gay, for God's sakes. Women were completely subservient. People of color had absolutely no rights whatsoever. The right wing in this country is not against the right to vote as long as you're white and have property. I mean, that's basically where we're at here. The right wing in this country hates democracy. Steve Bannon is a classic, and Karl Rove, a classic fascist. They use, like Hitler did, they use the trappings, the illusion of democracy, but they deny everybody else the right to vote and have only the people they want to vote. And right now we're at 6 votes, which is the Supreme Court, which is outrageous. There's never been a Supreme Court like this one. And they don't care about anything except their ideology. And I want to put one thing on the table before we go ahead. Alito and all these other judges talk about originalism. There's a big phrase with Scalia.
Yes.
And the real originalism, and I talk about this in my history book, The People's Spiral of U.S. History. The real originalism in America is with the indigenous, for God's sakes. American democracy was invented by the Iroquois and the other tribes that were here for 20,000 years before the whites showed up. So if you want to talk about originalism in American law, you have to start with the indigenous. And there was no question of a woman's right to control her own body in indigenous society. The opposite was true. Women ran the tribes. Most of the North American tribes were matriarchies. The women ran the show. Now, they let the men be chiefs. And I saw a documentary, and I love this. They asked a woman from the Iroquois named Audrey Shenandoah, why was it that if the women ran the tribes and they ran the houses, they raised the kids, they ran the gardens? I mean, that was the whole deal, right? So they asked her, why is it that if women run the tribes, the men are the chiefs? And she said, well, it makes them feel important and it gives them something to do. So, the bottom line is we are actually, and I write about this in my history book. People can write me for my history book at solartopia@gmail.com. I'll send you a PDF, The People's Spiral of U.S. History. The bottom line is that the biggest transition in human history right now is the transfer of power from men to women.
Mm-hmm.
Women are running the show, taking over, and the men can't handle it.
It is amazing because, I mean, if you take a look at what occurred, and I know we're talking about abortion right now, but I want to hit a bit on the pandemic. If you take a look at the countries ruled by women, our Jardine from New Zealand,
right.
Germany's Merkel, and you look at how the women handle the pandemic, it was entirely much better than men who had to test their testosterone for everything or try to make a buck before they could do anything.
Well, I was drinking a lot of bleach like Donald Trump, and I don't know. That's why my hair is all white. So, you're 100% right. And women are we hope, are less warlike. But the reality is that not only the majority, almost 2/3 of the college students in this country now are women.
Right.
More than half. I'm married to a lawyer. More than half the lawyers in the people in law school are women now. And all over the world, women are taking over. The men can't handle it. And so Roe v. Wade is about suppressing women. But in the indigenous, as I say, a woman, if she had an unwanted pregnancy, she didn't go consult with a guy, they just took a bunch of herbs and that was it. They controlled their own bodies. It was never a question. It was never a question during the writing of the Constitution. It never came up. The word abortion doesn't appear in the Constitution, even among the white guys. And I want to make another point very clearly, Egberto. You got these evangelicals, white evangelicals, men who are running around calling themselves Christian and saying that the United States is a Christian nation. And I will tell you, in addition to the indigenous, who, of course, were not Christian, the writers of the Constitution were, not only did they not say that this was a Christian nation, they're very clear saying it was not a Christian nation. They weren't Christians.
I know. Some were atheists, some were human. I mean, it's amazing.
I'll give you the rundown. I'll give you the lineup here. George Washington considered himself to be a Christian.
Uh-huh.
In one pocket, he had a Bible, and in the other pocket, he had a flask. He was a serious alcoholic, George Washington, but he was very clear on tolerance in America. Very clear. This was not a sectarian country. He wrote a letter to a synagogue in Rhode Island saying, look, you practice your religion. You're more than free to do that. We are not a Christian nation. Thomas Jefferson was a deist. John Adams was a Unitarian.
Mm-hmm.
His wife, Abigail, John Quincy Adams, the 6th president, Samuel Adams, the great revolutionary, they're all Unitarians.
Right.
James Madison. That means they believed more or less in a divine being, nothing to do with Jesus. They liked Jesus. Thomas Jefferson wrote a very famous book called The Life and Morals of Jesus of Nazareth. It was published in 1820. And he basically took the life of Jesus and he wrote it out and he subtracted all the miracles. And he subtracted the resurrection. And he basically said, look, Jesus was a really cool guy. He did all this great stuff. I really like Jesus. He was a progressive. He believed in human rights. He believed in women's rights, but he was not divine. The most important of all of them was Benjamin Franklin.
Right.
Benjamin Franklin, who's the great intellectual
scientist,
godfather of America. He was a deist. He believed there was some kind of divine force that created the universe and then just left and let us, work our stuff out. And Thomas Paine, Ben Franklin's apprentice, these guys didn't believe neither did Abraham Lincoln, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Lincoln actually wrote a pamphlet saying that the resurrection, come on. This idea that we're a Christian nation is utter nonsense. And, you're starting to see now, Egberto, this is very important. And only in the last month or two, there is a serious decline in the evangelical movement.
Yes.
The numbers have dropped by half. And it is now the oldest, a sect. And not only is it dropping in numbers, but it's shattering.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the evangelicals who are looking at January 6th and looking at Steve Bannon and Donald Trump, for God's sakes, are saying, whoa, come on, this isn't Christianity. Jesus, Steve Bannon sits with a picture of Jesus behind him and on his podcast, and he says stuff that would make Jesus cringe. Turn the other cheek, love thy neighbor. Come on, will you? Jesus may well have been black himself. So, there's a real earth change going on. And It all turns on Roe v. Wade because Roe v. Wade basically, and the whole abortion issue is who controls a woman's body. It's as simple as that. Do men running a government that's not democratic can tell women what to do with their uterus? You got to be kidding me. And so that's what this is about. And, this Supreme Court, what nobody's talking about, this Supreme Court is going to go after Social Security.
Oh, yes.
And Medicare.
A few years ago, I wrote how minority rule was going to come about. And it all had to do with the Supreme Court.
Right.
In that, when we talk about, because look, America is becoming more progressive. And we are going to eventually elect more progressive people, and we're going to pass progressive laws. And the only way for the corporatocracy not to have the progressive laws infringe on their theft is going to be to have a Supreme Court that deems all those laws unconstitutional.
Right.
And then it is for us to decide if we are going to accept the rule of the Supreme Court stating that what we, the people, want is unconstitutional. It's amazing.
Yes, and nobody's talking about the two big items, which are Medicare and Social Security.
Yes.
And I know that this court, when it gets done with gay marriage and gay rights and all the social issues, and banning books and destroying public education and all the poverty programs, they're going to wipe all that stuff out, and then they're going to come after Medicare and Social Security and and unions.
But what is interesting? What is interesting though, Harvey? I'm pretty sure they'll come against Social Security. I'm pretty sure they'll come against union. The corporatocracy doesn't want Medicare because Medicare is for old people, unprofitable people. Right. So unless they want old people to die, just die,
Well, that's, the Republican a form of healthcare is get sick and die quick.
That's my buddy, Congressman. What's his name?
Cory Booker.
No, it's not Booker that said that.
Oh.
It was a guy out of Florida.
Oh, yeah.
I've interviewed him a couple of times.
He's running again, Alan Grayson.
Alan Grayson.
Yeah. Get sick and die quick. But the reality is, but you said the important thing. And this is what my history book, The People's Spiral of U.S. History, points out. There's a small detail here. The boomers, like me, we're on our way out.
Mm-hmm.
The millennials are 85 million people, and the Zoomers are another 30 or 40 or 50.
Yes.
The reality is that the majority of the country was born after 1981.
Right.
And the majority of the country now is no longer particularly racist.
Right.
They don't care about gay people, for God's sakes. Who cares? I mean, they don't care. They like gay marriage is fine. There's mixed race has been going on for, I taught college for 14 years. And somebody asked me, I was teaching about racism. He says, well, what happens to racism when everybody's intermarried? It's gone, man.
It's gone. Yeah.
It's gone. And I got to, there's a funny, Clarence Thomas wants to get rid of all the progressive civil rights, just all the progressive Supreme Court decisions, except one. The love
interracial marriage.
Interracial marriage.
And I wonder why.
Yeah, right. And I noticed, by the way, he's always against freedom of speech, except there was one decision, the Playboy decision.
Explain. I didn't know about that one. What happened there?
He defended Playboy, because obviously it's his favorite magazine.
Oh, yeah. You remember Ding Dong or something like that?
Something like that. Yeah. So these guys are going to come at every right and every liberty. But the good news, and you said it, Egberto, is the majority of this country is progressive. And that's the big difference between Hitler's Germany and America today.
I am so glad you said that, Harvey,
right.
Because I need, and I want you to repeat that. I need a lot of our listeners. They are so depressed after that 6-3 decision And after realizing that, 5-4 for killing Roe versus Wade. But after, and I'm telling them, don't be depressed. Vote. Don't be depressed. Go out there and run. Don't be depressed. You are who, when Obama said, you are who we're looking for. I'm not even talking about Obama, but that phrase is such a powerful phrase. You just gave me the numbers. Millennials plus Zoomers. Come on. You guys got it.
Half the country has been born since 1981.
There you go.
And
they are
totally progressive. Church, the right-wing church is just falling through the floor. And all these people run around calling themselves Christian. They're about as Christian as Genghis Khan. So you have an elite in this country that would do everything Hitler did if they could.
Yes.
But the difference is that Germany had no democratic tradition. In America, we have a democratic tradition. And Germany was in no way, shape, or form diverse.
Right.
You had white people, and then you had whiter people.
Right.
But our saving grace is our diversity and our Bill of Rights.
Now, Harvey, look, there. Before we get into, there's going to be I think it's a North Carolina decision that has to be made. I think North Carolina has a case in front of the Supreme Court where they want to relegate back to the states with no interference from the Supreme Court, neither state Supreme Court or federal Supreme Court, that the legislature has ultimate domain or dominion over any election, the legislature.
Right.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, they're gerrymandered. They're not, they're set up for minority rule.
Mm-hmm.
And, we had in Michigan a referendum and in Ohio to set up good districting procedures. In Michigan, it's worked. In Ohio, the Republicans have completely shown that they hate democracy and they're doing everything to subvert it. So what the Republican strategy is to turn control of our elections over to these terribly gerrymandered state legislatures. That's a problem. And the other problem we have, and you and I have talked about this, is the corporate Democrats. We will win every election where the money goes to grassroots organizing. That's what happened in Georgia 2021.
Yes.
And then they turned around the Democrats and they did the opposite and they blew it in Virginia in 2021. If we can get the Democratic Party, the money that goes to the Democratic Party to go to grassroots organizing, even in Texas, especially in Texas, Beto O'Rourke could win in a landslide if he spent every penny he has on grassroots organizing.
I agree wholeheartedly, and that's what I've been preaching for so long. In fact, I you're going to laugh at this one, but I actually put on Daily Kos that it is time for contributions to go to the grassroots of our country, the grassroots organizations and independent media. And you know what? The attacks that I got? Anybody who says not to send money to the DSCC or the DCCC, you're no Democrat. You are trying to hurt the party because you're trying to not give. I'm like, why do we give consultants $15,000 and $16,000 and $20,000 to give advice about people these people don't even know?
And they always lose.
Yeah, they don't know, but they lose because they don't. Harvey,
they don't care.
Know the people. You are on. I watch you go to these organizations that are dealing with people from all over the country. I watch you at those Zooms and talking about how do we get these things. These consultants are too high up in the stratosphere to come down and meet the people that are actually on the ground doing work.
Right. And we've seen Andrea Miller and Ray McClendon and people from the NAACP and the Center for Common Ground. When they get $1, they make use of it. People go door to door.
Right.
They register to vote. These consultants in the Democratic Party throw millions of dollars at advertising, and it goes nowhere.
It doesn't work that way. There are all these, people know touch the flesh is much better than trying to get a message on national TV that most of the people you're trying to target aren't listening.
Right. And what we got to do is have grassroots campaigns. All the money should go to the grassroots. And the corporate Democrats, look, they had 8 years of Clinton, 8 years of Obama. The only thing we got was the ACA, which was fine. Clinton did nothing
marginal
as a president. Obama, if Obama had gotten us out of Afghanistan in the very beginning and done some stuff after the Big Short crash, Trump would have never been president.
Not a chance. You know what? You know what is interesting, Harvey? The biggest, and I saw this, believe it or not, the first year of Obama's presidency. I don't know if you remember how powerful OFA was. OFA was a grassroots Obama for America is what it used to be called. Then it became Organizing for America. But they kept the same OFA. But I remember the power in OFA because here in Texas, red state, I'm in a red area, and OFA came into this community. And OFA was so active that I had Republican neighbors that were ready for the change. And then some of these Republican neighbors were the same ones who became part of the Tea Party. And the reason why is they left a vacuum, Harvey.
Right.
They left a vacuum, Harvey.
Right. And I talk about this in my People's Spiral of U.S. History. People should write me solartopia@gmail. I love to.
I'm going to put that in the blog because I want people to get your book. And I think I have a copy. I hope I got a copy, but I have to.
And people should come on our Zooms. You're on our Zooms every Monday at 5 p.m. Eastern time. We had 110 people this last week. We talk about these issues. But the bottom line is the corporate Democrats have not delivered. And you wonder why working class people go with Trump. Is because Clinton and Obama didn't give them anything. And Hillary wasn't going to deliver any substantial benefits to working people. And actually, Trump promised to get out of Afghanistan. Of course, he didn't. But, so we have to take over the Democratic Party, Egberto. We've got to use that money for grassroots organizing. We have the people on our side. You look at, they call us socialists. Okay, I'm in favor of Medicare for all. 60% of the American public or more supports Medicare for all. Abolish student debt, end homelessness, end poverty, and destroying the environment. Go to the technologies that really work. All the stuff that progressives support in this country, that the right wing calls socialism, is supported by a majority of the public.
And we have earned it. Yes. We have earned it. The wealth that the wealthy has were made on our backs. You know what's interesting, Harvey? I want to say, because I'm glad that you framed it as corporate Democrats, because, right now it is in vogue to blow up on Manchin and blow up on Sinema, right?
Right.
They are currently just the whipping persons, right? Because if they weren't blocking some of the stuff and Build Back Better, I can guarantee you I could call 5 other Democratic senators that would have found a way to block it, just like they found a way to block the public option to the Affordable Care Act when we had 60 votes.
Right. And they didn't bother to make DC a state.
There you go. And we had 60 votes.
Yes. And here you have more than 700,000 people, including my sister, my niece, and my nephew and their kids, in Washington, D.C., more people than Vermont or Wyoming, and it's not a state. And here the Democrats are screaming at Manchin and Sinema, we'd have 52 Democrats if they had bothered. And Clinton could have done it. Obama could have done it.
But here's the deal, Harvey. Believe it or not, and this is what I tell folks about neoliberals, right? The neoliberal Democrat and the neoliberal Republican, they're just, here's what I always tell my audience. If you have the right and the left, I call them the neoliberal Republican or the neoliberal Democrat that are running both parties. One is the left rail and one is the right rail. What can you tell me about those rails?
They're against the public welfare.
But they're moving in the same direction. So why would we think they're different? If the rail, even if the rail is turning a little bit, it's one rail system going in the same direction.
But here's the great irony. The great revolution in energy technology in this country, which would create the jobs and would allow the public to control its own energy supply, would flourish if we actually had a free market in energy. If they would force the nuclear plants to be to compete on the open market, and coal and oil and gas, which are completely priced out now because solar and wind are better.
And not only that, externalities are not counted in the price of gasoline.
It's ridiculous. Me and Milton Friedman would be on the same page.
Harvey, we're coming up on time. Harvey, on Supreme Court, I got one last question. Okay. Because that was our major topic here. Should we go ahead and rebalance the court, given that it's a stolen court?
Absolutely. I mean, and these guys, all these guys lied in their Senate hearing. They flat out lied. They should be impeached. And there also need to be age limits on the court. 65 is fine, maybe 75, I don't know. But the court is completely out of control now. It's the worst court in history. We do not need a dictatorship of 6 Supreme Court members who are not justices. And you'll notice, by the way, that the 3 liberals now are all women.
I noticed that, yeah.
You got a black woman, you got a Jewish woman, and you have a Hispanic woman. So maybe we should make it mandatory all future people on the Supreme Court are women.
Actually, I want the next appointee has to be another progressive woman. I think it's time. And I don't want anybody complaining because the court had men on since its inception. No, except for Sandra Day O'Connor, who served for quite some time, and RBG for a couple of times. I want women to start taking control, and I want a woman to win.
Just remember, and please write me for my book, People's Spiral of U.S. History. I'll send you a free PDF, Solartopia Gmail, and I'll send you the link to our Zoom calls. Egberto, we love having you on our Monday Zoom calls. But the bottom line is this, just remember this. We are the majority. We support Social Security, Medicare for all, unions, saving the environment, free education, end homelessness, poverty, and hunger. All those things are supported by the majority of the American people. What we want in this country is majority rule, for God's sakes. What a concept.
What a concept. Harvey Wasserman, author, journalist, activist, extraordinaire. Thank you so kindly for having been on Politics Done Right.
Egberto, you're the greatest. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Politics Done Right depends on you to keep doing what we do. What do? We make sure to keep, number one, the internet seeded with blogs and information to counter the right and to present what progressives represent for the benefit of us all to everybody so that it's not misread, misled by any other entity. We make sure and populate that internet with blogs, with videos, with all these other things to make sure that we are informed and to counter everything that you normally hear that are lying at the right. We also make sure to create articles in magazines, articles in newspapers, all around the country to ensure, again, that our message gets out there. Last but not least, we also write books. As you see it, Class Warfare, the only resort to right-wing doom, How to Make America Utopia, are 2 of the many books that I've written on these issues. So please support us in one of many ways. Numero uno, you can support us at PayPal, either one time or monthly. Go to politicsdoneright.com/PayPal. You can support us on Patreon. That is politicsdoneright.com/Patreon. Patreon is spelled Patreon. You can support us by becoming a part of our YouTube channel, going to politicsdoneright.com/YouTube, or you can support us in many other forms that you can find at politicsdoneright.com/support. Be sure to visit our store, politicsdoneright.com/store, and get our books at politicsdoneright.com/books.
A few years ago, two professors from Princeton, Professor Alan S. Binder, Princeton economics professor, as well as Professor Mark Watson. They came out with the definitive report. They looked at, I think, 12 different presidents, 6 Democrats and 6 Republicans, or maybe 8 of each. I don't remember exactly how many. And they did it sequentially, right? And it turns out that the economy does substantially better, out of the margin of error, better under Democratic presidents than it does under Republican presidents. Now, they looked at all kinds of factors. And when it comes to under Republicans, we had certain things like certain types of shocks. So they had to discount for those. So they're saying Republicans just got unlucky with some of these shocks, right? And that's understood. But they said that only explained about between 42 and 60% of the delta, the 2 points or so better that the economy does under Democrats. So it only accounts for a few. The professors, after they've found that the luck part could only be attributed between 40 and 60%. And by the way, I don't even call that luck, because the rest of the world knows who's president of the United States. They know how to act based on who's president of the United States. They know how to spend based on who's president of the United States. And if they think things will go better, of course, an economy which has some psychological factors in there as well would do better. And that's the reason the economy does better under Democrats than Republicans, not only because of policy, but because of expectations and all of that. The professors proved that. You know, their study, their analysis is great. It came out with the correct results. The problem is, when it came for them to write a conclusion, they decided to edge. They didn't want it to seem partisan, so they said, well, we can't explain exactly why it is that Democrats do 2 percentage points. That's huge. 2 percentage points in the aggregate over Republicans when they are in charge. I want you to listen to the interview between one of the professors and Chuck Todd way back yonder. And then this is a part of a blog post that I wrote with some excerpts from the actual analysis that they've made. It's clear to me the reasons why. I am sure these very intelligent economists from Princeton, they also know the answer, but they also know that they want to ensure they don't seem too partisan. Check this out, and then we'll take it on the other side.
According to a new analysis paper by economists Alan Blinder and Mark Watson, it's not policy or politics. More often than not, they say it's simply dumb luck. And most of the time, it ends up favoring the Democrats. The paper examines how the U.S. economy fared under 12 presidents, all the way back to Harry Truman. What they found was that generally, Democratic presidents were in charge when the economy was doing the best. You can see Truman, Kennedy, Johnson, and Clinton stand out on the chart. Interesting to note, Carter's numbers are probably better than you realize because GDP growth was good at the time. His problem, of course, was inflation. Now, Reagan's numbers are probably worse than you remembered. Don't forget the start of his presidency was clouded by a severe recession. Now, overall, the economy grew at a rate of more than 4% under Democrats and 2.5% under Republicans. It's a pretty dramatic difference. But why? Well, Blinder and Watson looked at a number of possible factors, and they came up with 3 big ones. Number 1, oil shocks. The spike in prices in the early 70s hurt Nixon and Ford, and a 3-fold increase in prices did huge economic damage under George W. Bush. The second big factor, productivity. Surges in productivity helped Kennedy and Johnson, while a drop in productivity hurt Reagan. But the paper concludes, quote, these look a lot more like good luck than good policy. Now, the third big factor is simply consumer confidence. But the paper argues that may be a self-fulfilling prophecy. In other words, quote, consumers correctly expect the economy to do better under Democrats and then make that happen by purchasing more durable goods. So in fact, Blinder and Watson describe all 3 as luck factors that seem to happen randomly. So what about the policy? What about defense spending? What about Congress. The paper finds they may play small roles, but that they are more or less insignificant when it comes to determining why Republican presidents seem to get the fuzzy end of the economic lollipop. But the researchers admit the three luck factors can only explain about 60% of the gap. They say the rest remains, for now, a mystery of the still mostly unexplored continent. As somebody who studies these things, in your belief in statistician, when do you think this trend is a fact, is a provable fact? Because sometimes you look back, and I always say that even we've had 57 presidential elections, and you know what? That's actually not enough examples to say this is always the way it happens, this way or that way.
Now, always is too strong, but think of it as coin flipping. At some point, if you're flipping a coin enough times, you may discover it's an unfair coin. It's not actually coming up 50-50. So the question is, how many flips do you actually need before you can reach a conclusion like that, a probabilistic conclusion? And we could. I mean, there are standard statistical tests for that. And the likelihood that this large gap, you showed it on the first graph in the setup piece, was happening purely by chance, like coin flipping on a fair coin that just didn't come up 50-50, was under 1%. So all right, that's good enough that was good enough for us.
Good enough to put it in the for Princeton. All right, sir. Alan Blinder, thank you. Very interesting report, and I bet you there will be more research built upon it. Thank you very much.
Now, again, I listened to the professor, and it's a bit upsetting because he says if it were just a coin flip and it's only 1% that says the results that they got, that the economy does better under the Republican president, under Democratic presidents, it somehow can be attributed to luck when it's something that happens all of the times, which would be saying that luck is always on the side of Democrats. The professor is smarter than that, but you understand that he's watching his right flank. After all, he doesn't want to get on the negative side of one political party when one has to say the economy always does better under Democrats. And yes, it's policies. A policy that favors the average American citizen, even in the current capitalist economic structure, because of the speed of circulation of money and who you are biased for, the American people, that will give you a more vibrant economy. That is how economics work. These professors know that. And their conclusion said that. Or rather, the results of the research said that. Now, when it came to expressing the conclusion, they did say it's not chance. Yes, the economy does better under Democrats. But maybe it's luck plus something else we don't know. Of course it does better. And it does better because of policy, middle-class centric policies, better on one side than the other. Not as good as it should be, but better. Today, we have the honor of speaking to Dr. Anand Bhat. I always call him my millennial doctor buddy. How you doing, Anand? How are you doing today?
I'm doing okay. I have COVID, and I'm trying to recover, but I'm taking the pills. I'm feeling a little bit better.
So you're taking Paxlovid, right?
Yes, I am. I got it for $6. It's not bad.
Well, actually, you should have gotten it for free, but you're a doctor, so maybe they charge you anyway. But here's the deal. Before we even get into some of what I want to talk to you about, you had this interesting conversation I think it was at a restaurant covering college. And since we hear, since we talk about college here and the debt that people are in college here, give me that story about this woman who found out in Zurich, in what town it was?
Zurich, Switzerland, yes.
700 francs per semester to go to school. That's it. And that's not even for school. That's for books and room and board.
Yeah. I was in Switzerland. I took a walking tour, and there was some Americans there, and there was a family from Massachusetts. And the tour guide was telling us, that the number one university in continental Europe is ETH, Zurich, which is the technical college, which is Google's biggest office outside of California, is actually in Zurich. And she says, well, education is public, it's state. We have no private universities in Switzerland. We charge 700 francs a semester. It's not for tuition, it's for books and room and other supplies. And that's how much school costs.
Let me stop you for a second. Exactly what is francs in dollars?
So usually it's like 1 franc is $1.10, but right now it's about equal.
Okay, so, good.
Yeah.
So $700 has to come out of somebody's pocket who wants to go to college.
Yeah.
And they get room and board.
Yes. And then she says, I don't know what it's like in America. I heard it's $3,000, $4,000, $5,000. And
you laughed.
And I was like laughing because I was like, no, we wish it was $3,000, $4,000, $5,000. And this lady who lived in Massachusetts is like, oh, but you must be paying so much in taxes to pay for these things. This is very cheap. And I said, well, you either pay for it in taxes or you pay for it in the poverty of young people. So you pay for it either way. So you can make young people poor or you can pay it rationally. And then she said, or their parents can pay for it. And I said, yeah, not everyone has parents and not everyone has parents that can and will afford it. And it's not normal to have dozens of colleges that charge $60,000, which is what Boston is. In the world, that's not normal. So she didn't really care for that explanation, but I had to stand up for the regular Americans and not the very rich Americans who get to travel to Switzerland.
But you know what is so funny? That how easy it was for her to come out of her mouth that, if the kids don't pay, the parents will. Not realizing that we already made the fact that 80% of Americans couldn't handle a $400 incidental. Imagine that. And you have a person traveling to Europe who here's a good thing that we need to export to the United States. And she says, the parents can do it.
Export. I disagree, Egberto. Export. Free higher education was invented by America. The first public high school in the history of the world is Boston Latin, which is 400 years old, where Benjamin Franklin dropped out of. America invented free high school, okay? In 1900, the United States was the only country where people were routinely going to high school. That's why we have basketball. Do you know why we have basketball, Egberto?
No, I don't.
Because we had all these teenagers who were going to high school for the first time, and there was no sport for them to do in the winter up north. So they invented basketball. So there was something to do. And that's why basketball has a long history. It was invented in Massachusetts and it moved to Kansas. And Kansas, a famous coach, I can't recall. And it was a cold weather sport for kids to do. That's why we have these gyms. And that's how you have gyms throughout America, which is why basketball is able, I'm from Beaumont, Texas. We have a famous basketball player, not from my high school, but from the other school in my school district. And it's universal. Access to basketball is universal in the United States. You can be an NBA player, literally for the Boston Celtics, and be from the poorest high school in my hometown. But, if you want to be an actor or an engineer from the poorest high school in my district, that's not going to happen. But you do have universal access to basketball players.
Hey, but you know what is great, Anand, is that that what you said, we invented so many things and the other people seem to have perfected it because now their kids get educated. Google builds their biggest, second largest plant out in Zurich in a country that's much smaller than ours because they have an educated population because people can afford it.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I had to tell people this. I was like, the University of Texas, where we both went, was $50 in 1970. Mm-hmm. It was cheaper than $700.
Let me tell you, when I came to the States, right? While you had in-state tuition, I started at out-of-state tuition. When I went to school, the people in-state were paying $4 per semester hour. When I came, I was paying $40 per semester hours. I'm an old man. That's a long time ago. And that was, let me tell you, that was 10. In other words, you paid 10 times the amount the in-state person paid. Okay. It is just amazing. And now, I imagine now it's, what I paid for as an out-of-state foreign student is what they pay now, plus more as in-state Texas. It's crazy. It's crazy.
No, I agree.
But you've been out now working in Louisiana in the medical. You're a doctor out there, and you're starting a new field. What you've seen, how has our healthcare system, from what you've seen, what you've worked with, gotten over the last, let's say, few years that you've started practicing?
There's so many problems with the American healthcare system. It's not even easy to answer, because we had a recent person who became a faculty member here on a visa, and she had only practiced in New Jersey and California. And now that she was in Louisiana, she was shocked because she never worked in an area that was underserved. Like the number of doctors was underserved.
Right.
So we have a lot. So when you're in a place like, and not just Louisiana, but most of Eastern Texas, like if you're not in Houston or Dallas, but you're in the eastern part of Texas, there's not enough doctors. And what happens is you have mostly people seeing nurse practitioners or nobody out there. So I don't think, I mean, I knew it was there as an issue when I lived in Cleveland and in other places, but now I'm in Louisiana. I see very acutely that the absolute number of doctors living where they need to live is very, very limited. That's even before you get to health insurance, cost of drugs, cost of this and that and the other. But just physically, there's not enough doctors in the right places. And I think that's totally unknown. And I would say you're worse off being poor in rural than being poor in urban. That's okay. Medically speaking.
Now, it is amazing because now what that means is when you need to make an appointment for a doctor, again, first of all, using the emergency room is always the last resort, and that's what people use as first resort because they don't have health care. But what you're saying, though, is that people then now, even in this capitalist healthcare system that is supposed to be great because it's private, if you call a doctor, you probably have to wait for several weeks before you can see one.
People are of such varying education levels in this country that you have people like this woman from Massachusetts who has mental access to all of these things. And then you have people who don't even know that certain of these specialties even exist, even in a bigger city in Louisiana, which might have all the specialties. People wouldn't even know from a smaller town to be referred to that specialist. Even the doctors may not know. The inequalities are just absolutely massive, even before we get to even the payment system, which is, again, unfair and crazy. Now, here's another one that's very interesting that I don't know if you know. One huge difference is in Louisiana, historically, the government has owned a lot of the hospitals.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So because it's French, there was a charity hospital system. So charity in New Orleans was very famous, but under Huey Long, the government owned several charity hospitals throughout the state. They owned in Pineville, Shreveport, Monroe, New Orleans, Baton Rouge. Yeah. So they had a state, and it wasn't a county hospital system like you have in Texas, where only Bentog in Houston and whatever. It was a state hospital system because those towns were too poor to support it. So the state built them. Bobby Jindal became governor and he sold them to private companies. But the thing was, nobody was going to see these patients who were on Medicaid. So say you're on Medicaid and you live in North Louisiana, for example, and you need to see a rheumatologist, there's nobody to see you in 100, 200 miles. Like the geographic barriers are huge. Until recently, there was no Medicaid dermatologist north of Baton Rouge. So that's 2/3 of the state had no access to a dermatologist. They hired one guy and he's completely overworked. He had to close his schedule. He needs to hire multiple people. That's how busy he is in Shreveport. So that's an enormous issue. Now, one thing that I did.
Wait, but let me see if I understand you correctly. Bobby Jindal, he went ahead and sold hospitals that otherwise would have been able to take care of those people, is what you're saying?
So the government directly of the state of Louisiana owned these hospitals. In the this is Louisiana, in the bigger cities.
Right.
The towns are microscopic out here. Okay.
Right.
What is interesting is most of the parishes, which is what they call counties here,
right,
still own a small hospital.
Okay.
And in that way, you probably are more served in a rural parish in Louisiana than in Texas. Because pretty much every little parish owns, I mean, it may be a Band-Aid stations, it may not be that great, but
Right.
the parish directly, indirectly, or through some sort of nonprofit corporation seems to own a parish hospital in almost every parish. The larger hospitals that are worthy of being called a hospital were owned by the state. There was like 5 to 10 of them. I can't tell you how many, but he sold them. And it ended up being a big corruption of privatization because the contracts would have to be signed with a private company, and they would manage it, and basically lawyers and people. And when the governor changed to the current governor, he changed the contracts to different hospital system from New Orleans, and now they're running things in a very for-profit manner. But they are supposed to be taking care of the traditional population. Yes, the indigent population. So yeah,
but they don't. Now that is sad. So I mean, so what you're saying is really no improvement over these last few years. It's just simply has gotten worse, and for profit has entered its tentacles even further into what was a pretty good public system.
Yes, I mean, yes, because the idea that Huey Long had 80 or 100 years ago was basically, at the time before the Great Depression, the only medical school was Tulane, and it was private. And he invented this idea that I'm going to create a government hospital with an attached medical school, which was LSU. And that hospital is going to be learning research and implementing it on the people of Louisiana. So it would be a public hospital with a public purpose, with a public medical school. So research, science, service all go together. So it was the best medical education for the people, for the many, not the few. That was the idea.
That is amazing. Now, anyway, my friend, you've got COVID and you're home and you can't move and you just have to quarantine for the next 10 days. I know you're probably going crazy, even though you're on Paxlovid and all that good stuff. Let me ask you this. What's your thoughts on COVID these days? How are we managing it? What are your thoughts? Do you think it's going to be with us for a while? Is it going to become a cold? Where are we headed?
I don't know. I mean, they keep saying it will be. I don't know. I mean, because really, there are some people, and I'm not an expert on this, and I've seen so many people change their tune. I think everybody's become a politician in public health. I don't know who to believe. You know, there were countries like New Zealand and Australia who were doing the Chinese zero COVID policy, you know, and that would be one very severe approach, but it doesn't affect your day-to-day life when it's working. I don't know. I don't know what to think. With the number of mutations that keep happening in a globalized world, is there a solution short of a international zero COVID solution? I don't know. Will it eventually moderate and not be as deadly? I don't know. Long COVID.
Well, any virus can moderate to either become less or more deadly, right? You don't know which direction they're going to go.
I know. But historically, you know, these things would die down because there wasn't that much travel.
Right.
You know? But now there is. And I was just listening to a podcast about polio. And apparently they used to shut down pools and theaters in the summers in the 1950s. I heard about hand washing didn't become common in American culture until the 1919 flu epidemic. Mm-hmm. So I don't know, but one thing is for sure, it is said, and you'll like this. Do you know the origins of capitalism come out of a pandemic?
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so it's said that when the Black Death occurred in the 1300s in England, so many people died that they had to start paying people instead of having them being like feudal serfs, right? So you pay people in the Middle Ages. Well, capitalism,
because people you couldn't get them otherwise.
You couldn't get them because they died, and so there was a labor shortage. Like now, people started asking for more money. Like now, and it led to the end of feudalism. Was the Black Death. So wars and pandemics have always changed the world.
Let's hope that we start getting into more of a collective, as people don't only say we want money, but they start to say we want the company who we're making things for, right? Now, when that happens, that will be the beginning of what I wrote about, my utopia. You know, that's when that comes. Anyway, Anand, We got to get out of here. So as usual, you know what I always ask you at the end, and that is, tell me something that you want our audience to know that we don't actually know, or that we should know, or enlighten us with something that occurred with you on your visit to Europe. I think you had somebody tell you, why do you not like America? Which what you're just saying is, no, they're doing a great job here in these parts of Europe. Maybe we should start emulating them.
I'll tell you an interesting story, but I do have one classmate of mine who did OBGYN, and she settled in Germany. And after Roe versus Wade, she finally filed for German citizenship. She says, wow. I can't go back. She's like, high risk obstetrics. I can't come back to Texas. I can't come back to Missouri. So, I have some friends thinking about emigrating, which I think that's the new news I've heard. A lot of progressive minded people are thinking about moving from the U.S. So it's, I think some changes are afoot. That's
we're doing everything necessary to lose our best minds. I tell you what's interesting. I interviewed a guy, I think he's in Norway, and he left the United States because of our healthcare system. And his kid got paralyzed and got much better in the healthcare system in Norway. And I ran that story, and that story went viral all over the world, actually, with this guy who told the ills of the American medical system compared to Norway. And it is amazing that the things that we're doing, whether it be Roe versus Wade, whether it be for-profit hospitalization and medical health care, there's a lot that we're going to have to change. And it's people like you and I who stay here, progressives who stay here, that's going to actually get this change done. Anand, go ahead.
Oh, one more thing. I haven't looked into it too much, but I saw in the Wall Street Journal that Amazon bought a medical practice.
Yes, they did.
So we are looking at direct corporate slavery of doctors. And yes. I was telling somebody that once they've squeezed the poor, which they've done forever, then they squeeze the lower middle, then the middle. Now they're going to squeeze the upper middle. And then the last two things that the capitalist system wants to squeeze is eat the last seeds of growth, which are education. Okay. In Texas, they're calling these politicians are calling teachers groomers, and they're just ruining the reputation of public education so they can privatize that and eat those seeds. And then the healthcare system, they're trying to eat the last seeds out of that, because those are the only things that any capitalist with any brains understands, that those two are essential to create the workforce you need to run your companies. But when you start eating even the seed corns, then you've reached peak neoliberalism. So,
Dr. Anand Bhat, thank you so kindly for having been on Politics Done Right. Don't forget, folks, support the show at politicsdoneright.com/support. politicsdoneright.com/support. I hope you enjoyed the program, but we got to get out of here. My name is Egberto Willis. This is Politics Done Right. And you know how I end this, baby. I am what? Out. We spend a lot of time deconstructing the news, trying to parse it into a form that everybody can understand. We try to find those little nitpicks where it flies above the fray, etc. If you really like these videos that we do, I want to ask a big favor. Please go ahead. Number one, subscribe to our channel. And number two, please join if you can. Thank you so kindly for watching. Keep watching. Please remember to share. We must populate the entire internet with our progressive message, a message that we know is what most Americans say that they want. So help us, please join.